All right. We're officially live from the 317. Got people over to my left-hand side who will actually be your right. Everyone who is on the IG, and then also individuals in front of me as well. And super excited. So we're going to start off with a roll call. And one thing I do want to mention, I trust you all are well, safe, and healthy during these current times that we're in. And just in my market, Indianapolis, they are starting to open things up. Well, actually, they did push back in terms of just opening up additional businesses, but there's definitely some leeway or some forward progress on that side. So yeah, go ahead, comment below. Let me know where you are from. I'm here in Indianapolis, Indiana, and today is going to be a live Q&A. But the main topic is going to be how to decide what investment strategy is right for you. And so, yeah, comment below. Let me know where you're from. I'm here in Indianapolis, Indiana, as I open up as usual, live from 317, and that is the area code of Indianapolis. So, yeah, go ahead and just drop right below. Hey there, Wade. Thanks for joining. We've got Brian Anderson here as always. Hello there, Jake Mike, Chicago. Love it. Bobby from Denver. We've got Dave from Michigan, and it is phenomenal weather out here in Indianapolis. It is tremendous. I had the windows down, letting the breeze just go right through all of my hair. It's just, I truly enjoyed that. So I've got my little one that's in the background doing her. She may pop in and out of this video because she likes to do her cameos. So yeah, and as I mentioned, today's topic will be how to decide what investment strategy is right for you. Yeah, comment below with where you are from as well. We got Keith from Long Island, New York. We've got Liz. We've got the Don of Real Estate from Houston, Texas. Love Houston. All right, we've got several people that are from Texas, and I would love to hear those of you who are in Texas. Is it true that they say everything is bigger there? Because one, I had visited Dallas and also Austin, and those toilets in the hotel that I stayed for were similar size to Indianapolis and all the other places. So would love to get your feedback if that is actually true. So, and yeah, waiting for a few more folks to start jumping in here. But if you're wondering who is this bald guy that's in front of me, give you some context on myself. Those of you on Instagram, my handle is Sterling White Official. One more time, that is Sterling White Official. Thanks, Angelica from Dallas, Texas. Quite a bit of people from Texas. Tom Mazer from Arizona. All right, so let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Background on myself, Sterling White, born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. Not so good parts of the city where people who live there tend to, that is their utmost focus to get out of that environment. So single parent. And in addition to fraternal twin brother, some people say we look alike. I don't think so whatsoever. I believe he is as people say he's as dark as Wesley Snipes, but he's definitely not that dark. And yeah, so I just remember one instance in the environment that we were in. We lived in what you would say people on the outside would call the projects, and we lived on the lower level. And actually, outside of where we lived, the glass had cages outside of our windows. That's what I was getting at. And I remember there was every other day it sounded like fireworks were outside, and we always just had to get down on the ground because there was always stray bullets that went around just the specific apartments that we had lived in. And we've got Shell Bay 19, that's also a twin. Yes, twins unite. And those of you who are also bald, comment below and put team ballhead. So, all right. And so at the end of the day, decided to not be a product of my environment and leverage that as fuel. And through that is my first product was because I had to figure out a way to earn money in a legal sense, of course. And so that very first product was the was Kool-Aid, and then second was Pokemon cards in my elementary days, and then shifted to the it got started in construction 2009, very similar times to what we're currently in. Fell in love with the real estate sector at that time, shifted to more buy and hold, where I was able to buy my first property at 23 years old. I'm now 29 with no money out of pocket. I actually had negative funds in my bank account, just not being financially smart. And my credit score, when you would pull it, wouldn't even register. So I'm not even sure if that's worse than having a lower credit score or however those dynamics are. But I decided to overcome those limiting beliefs and essentially partner with someone who complemented my weaknesses, which my weakness was I didn't have the cash and also experience. And I partnered with someone who had the cash and the experience, but they didn't have the time to buy the deals. So that was the value that I was able to bring to that first mentorship and that partnership that I was able to get together, and then scaled up to 150 single families. In 2017, made a complete shift to multifamily. So owned to date just under 400 units, because I have exited out of all those single families and now on the strictly on apartments. And valuation is just under $20 million. And why I'm telling you that is, one, just give you some context to myself. I'm not perfect by any means. And also wrote more about my story in a book that I did put together just personally. And those of you, I am a firm believer in writing a book, especially I believe everyone has a story, and that have vivid and distinct lives as our own. In some way, there is some way to connect with one another, but the book I had wrote was from 0 to 400 units. So definitely for everyone, and that's one more time, from 0 to 400 units, would always mention to everyone, depending where you're, everyone would love to hear your story. I would love to hear each and everyone's story who is currently on here. So the owner of Bigger Pockets. No, I am not the owner of Bigger Pockets. I am simply a contributor where I just do experience shares very similar to this. I am actually a buy and hold investor, and my sole focus is income producing multifamily, and I contribute to Bigger Pockets. In exchange, I get the exposure. In their exchange, they're able to get people's the content from someone such as myself for free on that side, which gives them more viewership. So it's always about the value exchange, which is one thing I always mention to everyone. Yes, Josh Dorkin is the one who founded Bigger Pockets, and I'm trying to think, how long has Bigger Pockets been around? Maybe a decade or so, but yes. And yes, I was just on the Best Deal Ever show with Ken Corsini. And this is a whole thing that I want to mention about the whole during these times is I've decided to, yes, there's people that want to be on the sidelines and say it's not the right time to be doing things, but I take the complete philosophy of just flipping things around and going more all in, because I believe there is less noise that's in the marketplace. Yes, there is a lot of noise on the negativity side, but in terms of competitors, competition, that they've pulled back and they've, contract. So I've taken the other approach and just push more all in. So yeah, and I would love to hear you all's, first, those of you on Facebook, it would mean the world to me for you to like, love, and also share this. And then those of you on Instagram, keep hitting that, those hearts. It should be over here as fast as you can. Love seeing that come in. And someone says, where am I from? I am from Indianapolis, Indiana. So yeah, we're going to start with, I did want to jump into a couple questions that we have first. And today's topic is how to decide what investing strategy is right for you. So comment with any questions. And what year did you start? That's the first question. That is in 2009, where we were in very similar times to what we are currently in. And one question at the beginning says, if you are just starting out in the business, I work full time and plan to use my savings and bank loans to do this on the side. Is rental the best place to start? So, and that's where I'll get into the content to address that very question, because with that question you have for me, Brian, I would follow up with questions, or you would have to ask yourself questions to determine if rental is the best path, the best optimal path to go into. So there's that. And can you talk about banks will allow only 4 loans per person? So how best to maximize that? That I would post that specific question on the forums with a little bit more context. Brian, trying to think, I do know there is a restriction on certain loans that are out there. Myself is I'm more on the commercial side with getting lending from on apartments that I have. So there is no restriction within that. You just have to fit their specific criteria in terms of fitting the net worth equal to the loan that they're providing, and then also the liquidity. So there's that. All right, so let's go ahead and just jump right into the content with how to, yes, Hoosier, awesome. And how to decide what investing strategy is right for you. I feel like I have a bug on my head for some reason. So the first one, and this goes back to what Brian was asking earlier, is to reverse engineer where you ultimately want to go. in terms of your what is that number in terms of financial freedom, the whether you want to have enough income to live on to where that essentially supplements your current active income. So from there, you have your ultimate goal that you're working towards, and then reverse engineer, and that'll allow you to back into the specific model that you want to go with. So I'll further get into more depth, because the thing with the investing I'm referring to just on the real estate side, it's very similar to shopping for a car. There's different brands. I actually just recently got a Honda, and I've been a Honda fan for the longest time. And the reasons why I like the Honda is, one, it's super affordable. I'm not a fancy guy. It's very basic. You can say I'm basic in a way. I just like to keep things very simple, because I feel outside of just the regular living is everything so complex. So I just like to keep myself super simple and everything in my personal life. So there's that. And then also they are great on gas mileage. So it's like shopping for a car when you're determining which model you want to go with, because there's models, there's styles, there's colors, there's brands. And that's the same thing that applies to the real estate side. So is when you're starting out is asking yourself the right questions. And the type of questions that you will want to ask yourself is, one, how long do I wish to hold a investment? Whether I'm putting my cash in, I want to hold it for 5 or 7 years or 10 years, or maybe 1 year, more of a short term. The next question is, what returns are you seeking to achieve? And what that is, for instance, if you're looking to, you want a 30% net in terms of profit, and you want that in a 6-month time frame, then a fix and flip, something along those lines, would be a better fit. Versus, hey, Kinley, could we turn that down just a little bit? Thank you so much. And versus if you're looking for more of a buy and hold, or you're looking for something that gives you more, let's say 10 to 12% cash on cash, and you want to double your money in a 5-year period, then and you also want the tax benefits that's more associated with it, because when it comes to fix and flip, it's more highly taxable just due to the time frame that you're holding it, versus when it's buy and hold and you're holding it for a longer duration of time. Rental income is actually taxed. It's one of the lowest taxable incomes. I wouldn't even call it incomes, but the lowest taxable, rental income. So the lowest taxable. So there's that. And then the next is, you want to determine what is your risk level. And then lastly is, what assets do you currently have in terms of the cash, the network, or the skill sets. And just going back to what is your risk level, is, for instance, when it comes to what many people are currently facing in today's climate, is they may have all these various flips that they have put all this cash into, and not many people are buying. So there's that, is you tend to get a higher return in a shorter duration of time, but you're speculating, saying that this house sold across the street for this house sold across the street from this. Oh, I'm just going to be able to sell mine for this. And it's all heavily reliant upon the economy. So myself, I'm more of a buy and hold investor. And today I own primarily, 100% of the multifamily side, which is the least that has been impacted in terms of all of the various niches, meaning hotels. That was hit pretty hard. The short-term rentals, many people have been getting creative in terms of that specific model. But for the current apartments that I do have, is one, for instance, that I'm in now is 95% collected for last month. So that just gives you a prime example. And there's another one in this particular over 90% as well too. So nothing concerning. And that's what I'm just meaning is, what is your risk level? So it comes down to that. And just shifting on to the next one is, some people start with wholesaling. Some people start with fix and flip to be able to build the cash. And however many see the risk. But there's the other standpoint, is one with the wholesaling and fix and flip, is you're able to build quite a bit of cash on the active side up front. However, there is the risk that's associated with that too. And just to give you some insights to my path is some insights on the path that I took in particular. And let me see some questions that we have. Are you familiar with New Jersey market? If so, what is the best investment strategy? So as much as I would love to answer that question, that is one of those very open-ended ones where you could say, what is the best shoe that's on the market, or the best car that is when you're out shopping? It really depends on what, and that goes back to asking those specific questions for you, Sandra. Is based if you're looking for, let's say, more of a buy and hold model, and you're looking for the specific returns of, let's say, 10 to 12% for your return just on the cash on cash, not including the exit, then New Jersey may not be the best strategy based upon that market in particular, because the price to rent ratio may be a little bit too high. So hopefully that does answer your question, but there's no, it comes down to what is best for you. The next one is, do you think buying a newly built home to use as a rental would be wise in a neighborhood expected to appreciate well? It sounds like you may be Miss Cole, or I'll just pronounce Cole because I see Cole towards the end of your name. Is to answer that specific question is, do you think buying a newly built home to use as a rental would be wise? And as long as the numbers, okay, so let me repeat their question one more time. Do you think buying a newly built home to use as a rental would be wise in a neighborhood expected to appreciate well? Yes, as long as it's good on the numbers. And these are the three things I always look for: is buying right. Second is finance right. Financing is very critical, which right now it's very uncertain times with getting financing. And then the third is buying in a great location. So to answer that question, it just comes down to what the numbers, but on a high level, the context that you have provided to me sounds good. It's just hopefully that the newly built home that you're looking for, you're not going in negative cash flow in hopes that you're able to get the appreciation. That's where you're going to get your profit. Yes, and someone says, can you save this live so it could be referenced later? Yes, I can. More than happy to do that. And so just going back to the path that I took for many of you, and this is one thing, is I am a firm believer in committing first and then figuring the rest out later to avoid the analysis paralysis, because what many do experience is they ask themselves those questions, and then they still cannot figure out which model to go into because they study on flipping land, or buying and hold on single family or multifamily, doing new construction, whether to go with townhomes versus single family homes. So with that is, I started wholesaling. So I started construction, and then I shifted and did wholesaling. And from there, I did some fix and flip deals. I would say closer to about 10 or so, not a huge amount of volume. I got in there and saw that it was of interest. Got in there, saw one is very labor intensive in terms of all the management. Well, of course, starting out, of course, once you build the right systems, it can be a little bit more easier, less intensive. And then also I found it the most important to be highly speculative, meaning that, for instance, there's this location called Fountain Square where there's many hipsters. Well, what they say is hipsters. Not want to put a label on anyone in particular, but to go ahead and shift this a little bit. But in terms of, it was very close to downtown Indianapolis, and it was up and coming. And you could buy a house, you could find a house that's worth $50,000 to a new construction house that is on the market for 700,000 plus. So that goes to show you the huge swings. So when first jumping into that neighborhood was a little bit, I wouldn't say later, but about 1 to 2 years. But now it's gone up, and it's in terms of the values have gone up a lot more. But would buy a house for 50,000 and put anywhere between 250 to $300,000 into that. And then of course you would say, okay, well, based upon the comps around here, this sold for this sold for this sold for this, I can sell this for this. And in those scenarios, I just from an outside perspective, and then also learning from others, because I'm a firm believer, yes, it's good to learn from your own mistakes, but it's even better to learn from others. That many people in the 2007, 2008, 2009 had all these flips that they were going, and the market the bottom fell out. So in essence, they didn't have enough that property wouldn't rent enough for them to cover their mortgage. So in essence, they had to give the properties back to the lender. So that's what I'm saying, is that's why I found it more of interest. I shortly after that shifted to buy and hold, and then that's when I was able to buy my very first property. And this was buy my first buy and hold, in which it was the purchase price was $25,000. Yes, very affordable properties here in Indianapolis. You couldn't get that for that much now. And then put an additional $25,000 into it, and then rented it for $850. And the after repair value was between about $100,000 to $125,000. So just wanted to give you some context on that. And also, so that's the wholesaling, and then the fix and flip to be able to build cash, which that's one model to go into. And as I mentioned, for those of you who are just jumping in here, the main topic is to how to decide what investing strategy is right for you. And it always comes down to, I would say, just doing experience share of reverse engineering of ultimately where you want to go, and asking yourself the questions, and that will determine what path you end up taking. Because there's so many, it's like shopping for a car, as I mentioned earlier. There's so many makes, there's so many models, there's so many brands, there's so many colors, so many different features. So there's that. And then the next is there's the buy and hold model, where within that niche, you can be an operator, or which an operator such as myself, meaning I would find the deal and then raise money from investors, or you can be on the passive side to invest in an operator or invest in a REIT, or if you're looking to go with the buy and hold. And even within that, there's so many different levels that you can go in terms of the direction. So even within the buy and hold side, let's say you're going with multifamily, is you can go with something that's more distressed, and there's a lot more upside in terms of being able to put the value into it. Or you can go with something a little bit stabilized. You may pay a little bit more, but you mitigate your risk, a lot more of your risk, because you're not putting a lot of cash. So prime example, there's an apartment here that I have closed on the end of last year. It's 156 units, in which $2 million in terms of renovations is going into it. That is a lot of cash and quite a bit of deferred maintenance on that property. Yes, you do get the upside in terms of being able to push up the value, but there's still the risk that's associated with it. And myself, I have actually shifted my model from more of those heavy lifting projects to be more of a deal. And my criteria is apartments between 75 to 200 units that now are B assets. So built a little bit later, so 1980 to 2010. And from there is the rents are $700 to $1,000. Formerly, it was just a little step below that, still in working class settings. So that's what I'm going in terms of just being very niche and determining what your criteria is from there, and just reverse engineering. And then once you've got that, you've asked yourself the specific questions, then you can pick the actual niche that you want to go into, whether that's single family, multifamily, mobile home park, land. And I actually just spoke with an individual, this was the other day, where it sounds like they're in multiple things and they're just starting out. So with that, they could be spread very thin, because one, they're learning how to do mobile home parks, which is completely different from single families, and then also multifamily. So, the principles are the same, but there's just so many different little nuances when it comes to the various models. So that's one thing I decided. And there's this book by Gary Keller, and from that, not affiliated by any means, just want to mention this book. It's called The One Thing, and that's exactly what he goes into, is just figuring out what your one thing is, honing in on it, and then excelling at it versus trying to excel at 3 to 4 to 5 different things, and that'll just spread you thin. So go ahead and comment below with your favorite book as well. One of my favorite ones is Maverick Mindset by Doug Hall, and then also Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Those of you, if you have not read Shoe Dog, and Phil Knight is the founder of Nike, and he wrote the book about himself. Not saying in a narcissistic way, of course. It's a memoir, an autobiography, and that is one book that I read. And I've said this many times, but I would stay up reading this book because I actually felt like I was there when as I was going through the book. Very phenomenal. He was talking about running to blow some steam off, and how he wrote it, it actually felt like you were there. So it was a super cool experience. And so myself, when I picked the niche, is I just fell into the single family home side. It just ended up working out that way. And then shortly after, I shifted to the multifamily, and this was after scaling to closer to about 150 or so, just due to, and as I mentioned earlier, I exited out of all those single families and made the shift to multifamily because I'll tell you now that managing that many single families, because had some in Indianapolis as well as Dayton, Ohio, is very labor intensive, and it's a lot more just from personal experience. I feel having, and because my very first multifamily deal was a 46 unit, buying that 46 unit versus 46 individual homes, which with those single families, a lot of those were one-offs, a package deal, maybe get a package deal of three. But mostly through that experience is there was a lot of transactions, a lot of marketing, a lot of moving parts. Versus with the multifamily, I feel it just paid that much more off due to your ROI on time. So versus 46 single family homes that are all scattered throughout the cities of Indianapolis, and then, well, primarily was just Indianapolis just starting out versus 146 units, one location. There's all the units that are there. You can be able to have someone on site to be able to manage all that versus with a single family having to send a maintenance guy here, a maintenance guy there. And however, the same thing is when it comes to the pros and cons of, let's just say the example of single family versus multifamily, that those were on the multifamily side, the pros outweighed the pros more so on the single family side versus outweigh the pros on the single family side. For me personally, it may be different for those of you who are on these streams. So I'm never someone that's want to be in the situation that say, hey, if you can go multifamily, go minimum 75 units first starting out. To each his own when it comes to that, because you may be in a situation to where you can have enough income off of 5 or 10 rentals, or that's all that you want. So that's my thought process on that. And then also I wanted to look more for scalability and being able to build my portfolio. So multifamily made the most sense. And I felt that due to when you're selling a multifamily property, they look at more of the income that's driven on that, which is known as the NOI. And that's what they base their offer on versus single family. Is this sold for this sold for this? So that's just my personal experience here on the why I started in single family, because I ultimately just fell into it, and then why I made the transition from single family to multifamily. How large of a syndication did you need to move into multifamily? Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? How come? In terms of how large of a syndication, that very first 46 unit deal, total purchase price, and this was in 2017, of which the purchase price was 900,000. Convinced the seller to do a seller carryback, so owner financing, they're both the same thing, of 700,000. Put down $200,000 down, and then raise 685 to take care of the improvements and to put towards the down payment as well. So your thoughts on Airbnb? Personally, just not a fan, as many people experience in today's climate. It's very reliant in terms of people traveling, and as you see, people aren't traveling, so it's very affected. That's just myself personally. I know there's people who are in that particular model of doing the Airbnbs, but myself, I just feel that with multifamily, people always need a place to live, and it's not so reliant upon the economy. And that's exactly what I've been experiencing now. And I'm in a group, which is EO Entrepreneur Organization. And with that is I have other people who are in different, businesses. And out of the conversations I've had with them, real estate and people who are in multifamily are the least affected versus people who are maybe in restaurants, or they may have, what are other types of businesses, e-commerce that's out there. So that's just my personal experience here on that. How many partners were in the deal with you, or was it just you in that? So I'd have to pull up the exact stats, but I know it's between about 40 to 50 individuals in that first 46 unit deal. Yeah, roughly around that. So it was a syndication, just not myself. I was the one that you would call the GP, the general partner, and then the investors are the limited partners. That's what you would call it. What market was that apartment building you syndicated? No, thank you, Holcomb. What market was that building in? It was in Indianapolis. Let's answer some questions here. All right, which I'd like to know. So let's go ahead and answer some questions that are here on the Facebook. All right. Question: in the buy and hold model, what is the minimum cash on cash return you look at? 10% or more. Yes, that is correct. And myself, since I perform a syndication, the cash on cash has to be over 10%. So there's enough meat on the bone for myself, the operator, to have some. So I do equity splits, meaning the equity split can be anywhere between, and it just varies upon the deal, but majority goes to the investors, where it could be 85 goes to the investors, and then 15% goes to myself and team for putting it together. But there has to be enough cash on cash to where, let's say that 15%, to where the investors are still getting double-digit returns, and there's enough meat on the bone also for myself and the team to get a good return too, with that little 15%, because we always want to, at the end of the day, give our investor partners double digits. So didn't want to go into, hopefully that didn't come. Yeah. All right. Didn't want to go into like a pitch, but that's just the thinking behind that on that. What's to do? As I start real estate investing, should I put all my properties under an LLC? I am not a attorney. The path that I took in terms of so when I first started, well, the apartments that I have are all under a LLC, individual LLC, so separate LLCs. And then also when I was doing the portfolios of 10 single family homes, so it'd be a portfolio of those, and then allow outside investors to invest in those. I don't do that model anymore, but those were a single LLC that owned the 10 properties. And then when I would go do it again, one LLC that owned the 10 properties. So that would definitely be a question for a attorney on that. But that is just me doing experience share on the path that I took. All right, let's see more questions here. My ultimate goal is multifamily. Should I start with a single family house since it will be more affordable? That is by David S. Myself personally, and I'll just answer this question based upon my route, because I know for you, David, there's others circumstances, variables that are in your personal journey that I just don't see from that specific question. So I'll just do an experience share for myself. Is if I were to go back and do it all over again, I would still start with single family, because that ultimately got me the knowledge, the know-how to be able to make that transition to multifamily at the end of the day. So hopefully that provides some context, David. In that very first deal that I ended up putting together, a mentor funded it, the purchase price as well as the rehab, is I got thrown into the fire right after that. Sterling, you go figure everything else out. You can come to me as a sounding board, but I had to manage the transaction with the title company. I had to manage the maintenance team to perform the rehab. Gosh, what else did I have to? I had to do the leasing. And then also once they signed the lease, I had to take the incoming calls to do property management, essentially. And the funniest thing is, on my very first, this was the buy and hold deal, those tenants actually moved out. So they, they started subleasing. So they moved out. They were a restaurant. One was a manager at a local bar, and he had his bar back that was also living with them too, our bartender. They moved out somewhere, didn't even let me know, ended up getting some other guys that were at their restaurant to start living in there. So I had to figure that out. But that's one thing, is there's just, even through all this research and then the learning, and also I still have to just mention, for those of you who are on Facebook, give those likes, give those loves, give those give those wows. I love seeing those. And then also those shares. And then also everyone who's on the Instagram, keep hitting those hearts. Love seeing those. Is that, oh gosh, where was I going to go? Yes, there's all this research that you can do, the necessary education, but I'm a firm believer in just committing first and figuring the rest out later, because there's nothing I would have read in any books that would have said, hey, Sterling, this is how you navigate this situation if your residents halfway through the lease end up moving out and subleasing. I'm sure I could go through all the forums that are on biggerpockets.com to be able to find that, But I'm just saying from a general education point is those are the things that I only would have figured out by just committing first and then figuring the rest out later. All right. Okay. More questions that are here. I want to make sure I'm getting anything. What was your first deal? Yeah, that first deal was that, and that was from Mel Hayes, was that property that was $25,000. It was a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath with a 2-car detached garage. Actually, a wholesaler sent it over to me. And from that, this is one lesson I always want to mention to everyone is to trust but verify. Thanks, Charlotte Grant, for jumping on here. Thanks, Dan. Sold it. Love that handle you got there. And yeah, this question is from Mel Hayes. Is always trust but verify. Wholesaler sent over the deal. The rehab was originally supposed to be $15,000 and actually turned out to be $25,000. So always do the necessary due diligence, and that's how I learned from that is to ended up walking through the house. But when I walked through the house, I had absolutely no clue what needed to be done in terms of the renovations, and ended up figuring it out as we went. And it still ended up being a good deal just due to being all into the property for $50,000. That after repair value was over 100,000, and then rented it for 850. So that's what I mean is when you buy right, that's exactly what will help you in those circumstances. And then the second, finance right, is to when you finance right, especially now, is fixed interest rate, to not over leverage. I would, if for those, please, if there's one thing I would love for you to get away from this, take notes, is to not over leverage your properties. And I have not over leveraged, and that's what I mentioned earlier is yes, it's good to learn from your own mistakes, but it's even better to learn from others. And what I mean by over leveraging is, let's say the property makes sense to where on this one, for instance, if I got 90% in terms of a loan to be able to buy the deal, and I put 10% down. So in the event that rents start to pull back, you still have all that leverage. And what that is, when the rents pull back, you're having to come out of pocket in order to service that debt because you put too much debt up front on the property. And so in that circumstance, if you don't have the cash to be able to essentially, hopefully you guys get where I'm going with that. So that's where people end up getting in trouble. So the most I will leverage is 75%, and actually preferably to be even lower than that, have even gone to 70% on some deals. So yeah, just avoid the over leveraging, because in those cases is once rents start to go back a little bit, then you still have all that debt that you still are on the hook for, and you may have to come out of pocket in order to service some of that. You may not have the cash reserves to be able to do that in that case. So, all right. Brian Anderson, he's got a question here. He's got some great questions. What are your thoughts on the 1% rule? Do you follow it, or do you look at your cash on cash model? Yes. When I first started, I used the 1% rule, and that's when I was less sophisticated. And one thing I want to mention to everyone, I'm not perfect by any means. I still make mistakes to this day. I actually make a lot more mistakes than I have successes. So, and one mistake I made recently was, and many of you heard this, is on the podcast that I have, the Real Estate Experience. I had a guest on, and I forgot to record. It was an hour-long segment, and I forgot to hit the record button. And we went 30 minutes in. So luckily that guest said, yes, I'm willing to stay on for a little bit longer. So we actually shot the back half of the podcast to then piece together on the front half. So that's what I mean, still make mistakes to this day. And to answer your question is, when I first started, I used the 1% rule as just more of a rule of thumb. Was actually on that first one able to hit the 2% rule. But now, even more, I take the route of just looking at the cash on cash to determine what that is. So for Brian, for you, your 1% rule, in essence, translates to the cap rate rule on the multifamily side. So that's something that most people will leverage when they're looking at deals. So if it's a 5% cap, so the lower the cap rate, what tends to happen is the more desirable the asset, and also location, and the more desirable the asset overall, meaning that 5 caps here, you can get a 4 to 5 cap in downtown Indianapolis, which is a flourishing which is a flourishing part of the market, that setting, versus if you have a 5 cap that is in a war zone, that's a good indication that, okay, you would just move on to the next deal. So that's that rule of thumb. But if it's, let's say, a 6 cap in, let's say, a suburb location of, I'm trying to think where someone is from, of California, which you probably couldn't even get a six cap in most places in California, but we're just using that as an example, then I will take a step and dig a little bit deeper, because it comes down to your financing is what really tell you what your cash on cash is going to be. So hopefully that does help. With your question is, yes, there's those rules, 1% rule or the cap rate. However, it comes down to what your actual return is going to be, and that can come down to your financing. Okay, hopefully that didn't go over too many people's head. Hi, Sterling. How do you structure a seller finance deal when seller still carries a mortgage? So on that particular one, it was structured as a first mortgage, in which that both my partner and I were, that was a recourse loan in essence of the 700,000, and there was a fixed interest rate that was on it. Actually, it was a 3-year balloon, in which after 3 years that the total loan amount would be due, and there was an interest rate. First year was 3%, second year is 5%, and then third, well, it goes up. And from that is he wanted to get he wanted to get cashed out of the deal actually as fast as possible. That's why the interest rate went like that. And then also there was the amortization over 25 years. It was the AM over 25. And with that, I actually sold that first 46 unit deal. Didn't going into these, I'm more of a buy and hold. However, just moving up to more larger assets, and also the boiler system was eating at the expenses there. So, and then a 1031 buyer came in. So with all those elements, ended up selling that specific property, cashing that owner out, and then taking those proceeds and providing it to the investors, and then taking that and just rolling into additional deals. So, all right. Hey, Sterling, my name is Berto from Michigan. I've never done any deals whatsoever. Would it be smart to partner with someone or find a investor? To answer your question, I would say both. So the path that I took, and I would say for you, Berto, is towards the beginning of this, I go a little bit into my story on how the first deal I was able to get, I partnered with my mentor. So that was a double. So I partnered with someone, and that person happened to be my mentor, where in essence, and this is another book for those of you, and someone says, what is the 2% rule for? So great question. I didn't go into elaborate that. So let's use the 1% rule. So if you buy a house, you're all into it for 100,000, the expected rent is 1,000. So that's what that means. It's just a general rule of thumb. Here in Indianapolis, that very first deal, when I did the underwriting, all into it was expected 40,000, and rent was over $800. So, and that was market rate. That was not Section 8 or anything. So to answer your question, Puerto, is for that first partnership that I was able to get with my mentor is, one, he had the cash, but didn't have the time to find the deals. I had the time, but didn't have the cash to find deals. So ended up, that was the value exchange. So that's one thing, and one great book that goes into just value is Jab, Jab, Right Hook. And that's what I mean is, let's say most people that reach out for me say, hey, Sterling, would love to sit down with you, grab a cup of coffee, and pick your brain for 2 hours. Where is the value exchange? That's what I'm saying. In terms of you guys, you have to look from the other parties in. So if you can bring some type of value to the other person, then all the merrier. And some people may not be in a situation such as that person that was my mentor, to where they would be able to devote the time to mentor along your journey. So you may have to create a list of multiple individuals that you would be interested in having under your or having you under their wing. So hopefully that answers helps. Yes, Travis Newton says, so you put 25 to 30% down. That is correct. And I raise additional cash to take care of the improvements. So there's that. And we have Sam Nasr that says, good advice, never over leverage, recipe for destruction. We're about to see this movie play out full-fledged in the next 36 months. Sam, if we could star that, and put like a gold, and yeah, we should just keep, I'm just kidding, I wouldn't say keep it up for the remaining of the stream, but yes. And that's why I just was mentioning towards the beginning, yes, it's good to learn from your own mistakes, but it's even better to learn from others. So I had a lender, and I've been speaking with lenders and then also brokers too, to get their insights on where they feel the market is going. And this is just on the commercial side. There is a potential for just a very stagnant in terms of a low volume of property selling, because one is sellers are, they still have their prices that are just above, and their expectations are very high. And then also for the main operators such as myself, we're having to have reserves that we have up front, so more equity to the table, which ultimately affects our returns to the investor. So we're not even able to come up. So that's there's going to be something that happens where it's going to, I wouldn't say to shift completely to a buyer's market. Yes, to entirely shift to a buyer's market, but there's definitely going to be a little bit of a softening there, or just nothing's going to happen in terms of just a very low volume. So there's that. And then also what Sam said is, yes, some individuals, I wouldn't say there's going to be blood in the streets for the next 3 to 6 months. Who knows? But I still feel that this is going to play out for a lot longer than that, for people to really start to feel the bleeding, and that you'll be able to get these properties at deep discounts, or I wouldn't say pennies on the dollar, but that's where I would say for people to be ready in essence. But still at the same time, I feel those people that say that, let's say, for instance, I hear many people say, well, now's not the good time to buy deals because we're at the top of the market. And then those very same people will use the flip side excuse and say, now's not the right time because we're at the bottom of the market, and I'm not able to get financing. So there's always going to be some excuse. So I just want to go into that. All right. Okay. So Jay Williams says, hi Sterling, so green here. No, that's completely fine. And does all in mean all the money I put in, down, closing costs, repairs, etc., or purchase price? All in is everything. So the closing costs, the repairs, yes, that is what your all in figure is. Purchase price is separate. So what I mean, that very first deal that I was alluding to earlier, is the all-in expected at the end of the day was 40,000. So the purchase price was 25,000, but the all-in, including everything else, was 15,000. Actually, ended up being more than that. So 40,000, and the expected rent was over $800. Actually, rented it for $850. So that's what I mean by all-in. Is that would have been the 2% rule on that deal in particular. So. We have another question from Manuel Sterling. If you're looking to invest in all your due diligence, check out as it go. What, if any, would you consider now with the uncertain? Okay, all right. I believe I get where you're going with that. Is what if you would consider all right. So in essence, I would have a contingency in the specific contract, meaning, and actually had a denial from. I just recently spoke with a seller that says if you're going to have any contingencies on financing, then we're not going to move forward with this deal. So that's the type of pushback, because in essence is from their side, yes, I would have the financing contingency, but I could still bank on so many different things in terms of ways out. Even if, let's say, I am able to get the financing, but the interest rate is a little bit higher and the terms aren't very attractive, then I could still use that financing contingency as a way out. So that's their rationale on thinking, which makes sense. But my rationale is, hey, if I'm not able to get the financing, then if I put 200K down, that's refundable up front, but then it goes hard and it's non-refundable, I would want to get that cash back if I'm not able to get the financing on that side. So yeah, let's go ahead and answer a few additional questions here. All right. Someone in California, price is still high, but I'm already seeing prices going down. This is exciting to me. I want to buy with my son and do a flip. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for doing that experience share on the California market. Okay. Let's see some more questions that we have here. All right, so I'm a first-time investor and I'm planning on buying a 4-unit building with a mortgage loan. Any suggestions? Yes, to get buy right, finance right, and buy in a great location. So that just goes back to those are my philosophies in terms of being able to buy deals. You stick to those, you'll be golden, like Pony Boy from The Outsiders. Okay. Next one is just squeaked a little bit. We'll answer one more here. And I always want to mention I truly appreciate you guys through these streams because this also helps me in terms of fuel. Because Tony Robbins talks about the secret to living is giving, and I'm definitely a firm believer in that because myself I get drained by even though I always inputting as much positive and mitigating as much as the negativity, but still as an operator myself, I get affected and I just be fully transparent. So doing things like this, I love you guys at the community from just human being to human being. So keep being awesome. That's that. And that's why one of my philosophies is to give, and in essence that goes for everyone on here is if you're feeling one of those moments where your mind's not where you want it to be, is just to go out and just help someone. And that's just one sure thing that's always personally helped me, along with as much positive influence as much as possible, and to get away from the people that are negative. I'm not a fan when it comes to negativity, and will simply just cut it out. And that was one of the things that really helped me along my entrepreneur when I really changed the trajectory of my life. Is one, cutting out the news was huge, and still I cut out the news. And even with that, yes, I still am informed. I get informed from other people if it's that important. And then also, the second thing was cutting off all my friends because they were not going with where I wanted to go at the end of the day. And then the next was self improvement. First thing I came across was Earl Nightingale, Lead the Field. This person, he actually was they call him the Dean of Self Improvement, was the one that actually pioneered listening while learning. So truly did enjoy. So the self improvement, investing in myself, I believe for everyone on here, the investment, the best investment in the world, even over real estate, is in yourself. That's what I would just say personally for everyone. And what your do. So one more that we have here. All right. So Jay Williams, Sterling, you are out of state, and I want to pick your brain. I'm in Cali and can offer a virtual cup of coffee. I will actually buy, but can't meet in person. Is this something you are up to? I would say follow up in the next week to week and a half. More than happy to help you out with that and see what we can work out. Just absolute madness is going on in my world. Can you please talk about Class A, Class B, Class C properties, risk, reward, and any thoughts? So the thing with, I've always separated when you talk about Class A, Class B, Class C, I do by class of properties, meaning when they were built, and then I also separate the neighborhood because one thing that I've witnessed when it comes to people speaking on terms Class A, Class B, Class C is there's so many gray areas. Prime example is, gosh, I just had one that was in my head in terms of a gray area that I hear often. When people talk about affordable housing in multifamily, so affordable housing, one could mean where it's government subsidized, or affordable housing could mean affordable rents, meaning between $600 to $1,000. So that's one of those things with I always, when someone says, do you do affordable housing? Do you mean government subsidized, or do you mean market rates that are just affordable for the average person? So that's one thing. So I always like to separate them too. I'm the latter. Is I have like this specific property I'm in is market rate, and it's 80 units, and it's the average rent is $700. Well, $750 actually. We're pushing up the rents, and so Class A is generally built. I'd have to pull up an article, but I would just type in a Google search. But Class A product is newer construction versus, and with that's what I was mentioning earlier, is the lower cap rates. Is normally a Class A project will be built in, let's say, your specific city downtown. because there's a lot of Class A where they're going for those very high rents. So with that is your risk is a little bit lower just due to your renter base. B is just a little bit step below that, so not as newly constructed. More of these are built in the suburban type of locations. And then the C class property are those that are built in, let's say, the 1970s, the 1960s, that may have some deferred maintenance and are just in the urban core. So just outside of the downtown locations is where you'll find those. Some of those you can find in the suburbs as well. But hopefully that does help. So appreciate everyone so much. And those of you who are revisiting this, it would mean the world to me for you to share this on Facebook. Of course, on the IG, you're not able to do that. And yeah, and those of you on the Instagram, don't ever hesitate to reach out to myself, Sterling White Official. One more time, that is Sterling White Official. Slide into the DM with any questions. I'm here to be of value to get you all through these times, because myself, as I mentioned earlier, the secret to living is giving. So have a great one, everyone. Keep being awesome. Thank you. All right. Okay.